Hi Tubies, it's Thursday here on Pagan Perspective, and as you may have noticed, I'm Arienda Ravenheart, and I'm now taking the regular slot on Thursdays, and I've been moved from my spot on the subs week on Tuesdays. So this is my first week doing my regular slot, and I'm really excited to get on with it, because we are doing the topic of scrying this week, and this is something that I particularly enjoy. I'm quite fond of divination in general, to be honest, and I'm particularly good at tarot. I do a lot of that in my own practice. But scrying is also something that I find really enjoyable. And the exact topic for today, which I will post in the box below, is quite interesting actually, because it asks about the more unusual forms of scrying. So that pretty much means the least popular or the less heard of options for scrying, and they're the ones that I find particularly interesting actually. So I'm just going to run through a list of ways of scrying that I know about, and hopefully that will inspire you as well. So the idea with scrying is that you perform some kind of action which leads to the production of an image or a series of images which you then interpret the meaning of to give you a divinatory message. So anything that can produce an image can be used for scrying. And so when you think about the various options that are out there for you, you really don't need any tools. It doesn't require any money or anything like that. And you know, most of the time the stuff that you can use for scrying is stuff that you will have in your own household. So there's a couple of options then for the more popular and well heard of versions of scrying, such as using a crystal ball, candle flame or incense, using an open fire or a bonfire if you're outside, black mirror scrying, and a couple that Cara mentioned as well in her video, which I was going to talk about, but Cara's already covered that, is the idea of using the grass in the field or the leaves on the trees. That is a less heard of option, but it's completely free. It gets you outside, and it's nice to just be sitting out in a field and just watching the grass or the leaves in the trees. That's a really nice version of scrying. And cloud scrying as well was one of the ones that came up in the question. Kids often do that as a game of trying to see what shapes there are in the clouds, but if you have the intention while you're cloud scrying that you're divining messages from the clouds, you can then interpret that as a message from the god and goddess or whichever higher powers you relate to. So some of the less heard of options then, which I'll quickly cover here. Flowers and herbs in water. I find this one's generally best done if you're doing it at home in a sink, and just leave a tap running, like not particularly strongly, but just leave it trickling. And then you can either use fresh cut flowers or dried herbs that have properties that you might want to use, such as herbs that are particularly good for divination or psychic meanings and that sort of thing. And you sprinkle the mixture of herbs into the running water and then divine meanings out of the pictures that you see. The same thing can be done on the surface of a river or a lake, where you throw either cut grass in or flowers or herbs or leaves, and then divine messages from either the images that form or the direction that the leaves move in. Anything like that. Just make sure that you decide on a method before you do it. So for instance, if you were throwing a handful of flowers into a running stream and you were gonna look for an image and they didn't really form an image, but then you thought, okay, well, I'll just divine the direction that it's moving in, you know, it might have already passed. The time to read that message might have come and gone before you've actually got into it. So as long as you're well prepared and you have the intention of divining messages from whatever happens, it really doesn't matter what method you want to use. A couple of other options for you are candle wax and water, where you can pick the colour of the candle depending on what question you want to ask, or just use a black or a white candle for a kind of a neutral message, and then have a bowl of water nearby. Allow the candle to burn down a short way so that the wax melts on it, and really think about your question, or just think that, you know, you want a divine message, and then tip the wax that's melted into a bowl of water or a cauldron of water or a sink or a bathtub, and then the wax will solidify when it hits the cold surface of the water and divine a message from the shape that the wax forms. You can take the wax out of the water and, you know, move it around, see what shape it's made, and then you can either keep that and come back to it, or you can repeat the process and pour another chunk of wax into the cauldron and then have several pictures of wax instead and divine them together. Another option that's quite well heard of but is definitely a form of scrying or divination is reading tea leaves or coffee grains. This can be done not with the instant coffee but with coffee beans as well as tea leaves. So if you get like the fresh ground coffee beans, if you've got some kind of I don't remember what they call those things, like a percolator type thing, or a proper coffee maker with the kind of grinds that don't actually dissolve, because if they dissolve you're not really going to have anything left to use. So you can do it with coffee beans or tea leaves, and you drink your drink, you save a little bit of the fluid in the bottom, swirl it around, tip it out, and then any coffee grains or tea leaves that are stuck in the bottom of the teacup can be interpreted as divine messages. So that's a couple of ideas of scrying. And as you can see, there really is no limit apart from your imagination when it comes to scrying. You can use whatever you have to hand. You can just feel called to do something while you're outside. Like I think it's the introduction to Scott Cunningham's Earth, Air, Fire and Water, More Techniques of Natural Magic. There's a mouthful of a book for you. The introduction to that is so moving. It's just a woman out in the field, and she picks up a handful of grass and she charges it with her energy and she throws it to the wind, and then that is her spell. But that is an idea for scrying as well. When you're outside, just use whatever you have to hand and scry with that, because it really is, you know, cheap or completely free, and you don't need any tools or anything specifically like that. Just use whatever you have to hand. As long as you have the intention of divining messages from it, it really doesn't matter. And one thing that came to mind actually while I was watching Kara's video is something that I do a lot of the time, but I don't necessarily refer to it as scrying, but now that I think about it, it probably would come under that category. I am quite a fan of really long bubble baths, so I'll just pour in like loads of bubble bath to make all those foam cloudy bubble things, and while I'm in the bath I will actually swirl the bubbles on the surface of the water and then divine messages from that. And it's something that I've always done, just because I normally just spend hours in the bath just doing nothing, or, you know, lighting candles and incense and stuff. But I do actually divine messages from the bubble bath, and yeah, now this topic has come up, I do know that that is actually a form of scrying. But, you know, that's an idea for you. That's something that everybody can do when they're at home. And it doesn't really require you to have any tools or anything like that. So that is one method that I do actually use, which is probably very unusual for some people. But that is one method of scrying that I do, and didn't realise until now. So I hope you've enjoyed this topic, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week, and blessings.